What drives you, exile? Is it justice? Revenge? Honor? No. It is power.
Now, let us see if you truly understand what it means to be Nightmare.
Deeper still, exile. Deeper still.
What's up everybody, it's Victon here with our first in-game build guide for Ritual League, the CI Dominating Blow Guardian. And let me tell you, this character has been a blast to play. I at least started with it and learned a ton as I leveled up, and even more when I progressed toward this league's in-game content. All of that juicy knowledge is what I hope to bring to you guys today. I definitely think this build turned out even better than I expected in general, so I'm pretty happy about that. Along the way, I did find a few things that this build struggles with, so I will go over those in the video on how to combat any of those issues you guys might have faced while playing this build, as well as the many things this build does very well that you can abuse to have an incredibly successful league for making tons of currency and just in general having a blast doing so. Before we get going, as always, if you end up enjoying this build guide, do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. Also, if you're enjoying the content and want to support the channel, I do have a link to my Patreon below, where subscribing gets you juicy benefits like access to my sub-only Discord, where we chat about these builds all day, every day, and I personally am in there doing build reviews all the time. I also do stream on Twitch if you guys want to ever stop by and ask some questions. Feel free, I'm always happy to help out. But enough of that, let's get back to the build guide. One thing that I do like to do on these in-game build guides is I give you guys a quick overview of the build before we get into the more in-depth view of everything. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Basically, this build I would say is an overall sort of jack of all trades. It's absolutely fantastic at farming in-game maps and especially the Ritual League mechanic. And in this expansion where there's such a huge focus on farming maps, I think this character is in a fantastic spot, so an easy S rank here for this category. For boss killing, I'd give this an A, and only because there's a few bosses out there like Cyrus, for example, that this build doesn't do so well on because you need to get your minions out to do damage, and when there's only one mob around, the boss, it takes a while and just feels a slight bit clunky. Whereas bosses like Uber Elder, there's plenty of mobs around the boss to quickly spawn your sentinels, so those bosses are easy peasy. As far as survivability, we have a clear S+ here. As you guys could see in the gameplay showcase, I was doing a tier 16 burial chambers juiced up with double beyond, 4 awakened sextants, 4 gilded scarabs, and 100% delirium, and that's only on day 4 of the league, and I'm not fully min-maxed. I don't have any awakened gems, and I was doing just fine. It was surprisingly incredibly tanky with how much ES on block we have, which we're going to go over later. We also are CI with a minimum of 6k ES and up to 8k ES for a min-maxed build, and 90% physical damage reduction alongside 80% cold res and 75% lightning and fire res. So very, very tanky. For DPS, I'd give it an A+ here, because while its damage is still great, there are other builds out there with higher DPS. Granted, they do cost significantly more, but hey, an A+ is just fine with me. Moving on to the build costs, the budget life version of this build, which I have a build guide for already and it's going to be linked in the description below, it can actually be done solo self-found or for just under 1 exalt if you really want to get a couple choice items. Incredibly cheap, and it was a great starter for that reason. For in-game build, we're looking at just about 10 to 15 exalts once this video gets out and the prices adjust accordingly. I purchased this full build for about 8 to 9 exalts, but prices change a little bit when these type of builds come out, so expect just a little bit more than I paid. And honestly, that is not bad at all for an in-game build that's nearly min-max. For the build's viability, I would obviously say this is a softcore viable build because pretty much everything is, but even hardcore, I would definitely say that this is a very tanky build, and you guys can easily do this on hardcore. But for solo self-found, I can only recommend the budget life version of this build, as this version has way too many uniques. Yeah, that's a general overview of the build. So next we're going to go over the path of building, the skill tree, and then we're going to talk about all of our skills that we'll be using and then wrap it up with the items that we're looking at getting. So without further ado, let's hop into the path of building. Alright, so as you guys know, I like to use path of building to show you guys everything that you need to know about this build. Just real quick before we get going, if you need to import this and you've never done it before, you're just going to copy the POB pastebin link in the description of this video. You're going to go up here to import export build, and then we're going to go over to this import from pastebin. You're going to paste that right in there, and you're going to click import, and you'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and go back to the tree. Now I'm going to first mention to you guys that I typically do trees down here for you leveling up the build all the way from level 1 up to level 100. I do not do those in my in-game builds because at the time of it being a quote-unquote in-game build, you've already reached a point where you have leveled through the campaign. So if you guys are interested in learning about how to level this build up, I do have an in-depth guide on leveling this build up. It'll also be linked in the description. So I'm not going to go over every single note here because that would take a ton of time, but this is a much different version than the life version, so I will go over some things that are very key to this build. So as you know, we guys are Guardian, so we're going to start over here. One of the things that you'll notice now is that we are picking up some block nodes. So we'll be having these nodes right here, which are fantastic block nodes. We also have a couple block nodes up here. Other than that, we also are going to be grabbing a little bit something different here. So we're also going to be going spiritual aid as well as spiritual, command, because we need attack speed. The more attack speed that we have, the more we're spawning our minions, and that's really one of the clutches of this build is spawning your minions. So basically the way I've designed this, and I've also gotten the skills and the items, is to get minions out as fast as possible. So as you can tell from here with spiritual command, increases and reductions to minion attack speed also affect you. So we're going to be getting a ton of minion attack speed with this build, and also Flesh Offering in general is going to give you a ton of attack speed. So all of their attack speed is going to be going to you, which is going to help you get out sentinels much faster. So you'll also notice here that we don't have resolute technique, so your hits cannot be invaded, right? So we need to make sure that our hit chance is as high as possible. So you'll see over here, player, our hit chance is only 92%. That's about as high as I could get it. Anything below that it feels pretty bad, but I really couldn't get it any higher than 92 without losing too much in the build. But 92 is just fine. It's going to be fine outside of, like I said, those in-game bosses like Cyrus, and at that point it does get a little sketchy, but there's just not much you can do about that. You want to use this build for different types of the game, like farming the in-game maps, and even some of the bosses. Like I said, Uber Elder is very good too. So that's why this spiritual aid is very good, because it's going to give you a whole bunch of accuracy, which really helps on our hit chance. Hit chance is very important. So you guys, if y'all are not spawning minions all the time, make sure you guys check y'all's hit chance. It's very important to at least be above 90%. So one of the other things that we are doing in this build is right here. We are going to be getting a blue nightmare, which is a bit expensive. It's one of the more expensive items in the build, but it's still not even that expensive. But it's going to be giving us a ton of extra block chance. So as you guys can see over here, we have block chance 61%, and we have spell block chance 55%. So a ton of block chance. And that is without this node right here, Bastion of Hope. So every 2 out of 5 seconds, we're going to be max block chance, 75%. So the reason we'll do all of this block chance, I'll go over it in the items, is basically we have an item that gives us energy shield per time that we actually take block. So I'm pretty sure it equals about 1,000 energy shield every time we block, and we're blocking all the time. So we're all the time getting 1,000 energy shield back. It's taking tons and tons of times a second. And as you could see in the gameplay showcase, that's how we were able to survive those crazy maps, because we're able to take all of those hits in, but then get energy shield back. So another thing you guys will notice here as we're kind of going through the tree is I'm also picking up sacrifice, as well as a couple different options for just our tankiness for our minions. I did notice throughout playing the build that your zombies die all the freaking time, and I got super annoyed with that, so I actually gave up on them And the Spectres as well, since they got a nerf in general, all Spectres across all the boards got a nerf to their life. So they have considerably less life than they used to, which caused me to actually have to pick up some of these defensive nodes for our minions. So for example, Sacrifice, and we also went with over here Grave Intentions. And between those, it's pretty decent with tankiness, and I actually also wound up anointing Indomitable Army. And the reason we're doing that is because you really do not want your Spectres to die, and you do not want your Animate Guardian to die. Those guys give you so much damage that you just don't want them to die, especially the Animate Guardian. When replacing its gear is going to cost you a little bit of currency. So moving on here, there's not too much to cover over here. We do have a Healthy Mind just for extra mana, because mana for us is extremely important, which we'll talk about in a second because of the Guardian. So getting as much mana as possible is very, very important, which is why we pick up Deep Thoughts, and also the Cruel Preparation, that life actually turns into mana because of Healthy Mind. Now I picked up a 1% reduced Healthy Mind. You guys don't actually need this. I prepped this because I will need it later on when I change the build up very slightly, but you guys don't need a 1% reduced mana reserved. Just a regular one works just fine. So moving on from there, we just have some ES. As I mentioned earlier, we are a ES build, so we're going to be going ES. And make sure you don't go through this path right here, by the way, guys, because remember, this life is turning into mana, so we want to stick with life here. I've heard a couple people that want to go down through there, but let's make sure we go through up here. A little bit of ES over here, and as I mentioned already, the Grave Intentions for defense. Down here we just get some mana, some ES. Right here we do have a replica pure talent Viridian Jewel, and I have a corrupted one with minions deal some increased damage. Now the reason we're getting this is for that Templar 4% chance to block attack and spell damage. Again, we're just getting as much spell block and block chance as possible, so that when we block, we're getting energy shield added back into our health pool. Now we also will be getting as much mana reserved as possible. We don't need to get this down here. We are just fine with these nodes and these nodes. And I guess while we're over here, just make sure that when you guys switch over to CI, you are getting a Zealot's Oath. That is incredibly important. A lot of people forget this, and basically what it does, life regen is applied to energy shield instead of life. So we have tons of life regen in this build, but it's not going to work for your energy shield unless you get Zealot's Oath. So make sure you pick that up. So moving back over here, we obviously take Chaos Inoculation. Our maximum life becomes 1, and we're immune to chaos damage, and we only have energy shield. So for our cluster jewels up here, we have a Renewal, a Call to the Slaughter, and a Rotten Claws. This could also be a Vicious Bites as well. This is, like I said, it's not 100% min-maxed, but we're getting there. This is very close to 100% min-maxed. That jewel is probably not too expensive. It's probably only going to be about a maybe 200 to 300 chaos, which might sound expensive, but in the long run it's not too bad. So that is our large cluster jewel. We definitely at minimum want a Rotten Claws, because a Rotten Claws is going to give us, where is it, right here on the back, the 12% chance to impale. So let's go to our calculator over here. Let's make sure we have Dominating Blow checked, and impale chance is very low, so make sure you click on that as well. There we go, see, 98%. I have a lot of people that ask me, why is their impale chance so low? It's because you guys don't have show minion stat. You want to check that. So 98%, so we're very close to 100%. We used to have 100% in this build, but they nerfed Rotten Claw. Now we're down to 98%, which is not too bad, but that's why you at minimum want a Rotten Claws in here to get as close to 100% as possible. Now for the medium cluster jewels, our first one here, the only thing that you want on it actually is Uncompromising, and where that is a Determination, has 30% reduced mana reserved. We want to get that as low as possible. We actually want to get it to almost 0. I think it actually comes out to Determination takes 1% mana reserved, so it's not too bad, but we need a lot of those points in order to get that. So we have that on this medium jewel right here, and we also have it on this small jewel right here. Now one thing that I would suggest for you guys is to get something with at all attributes or dexterity and strength. We are a bit short on dexterity with this build, so getting this dexterity in any of these cluster jewels is fantastic. It's going to go a long way and make you not have to pick up nodes like this or these dex nodes here if you could just get it on your cluster jewels. So moving over to our second medium cluster, we're actually going to need a one called Blessed Rebirth. This is actually extremely important if you're doing those in-game bosses. So minions created recently cannot be damaged, and recently, just so you guys know, means 4 seconds. So 4 seconds after you spawn a sentinel, it cannot be damaged, and a little bit of minion life. And the reason we're doing that is especially in these in-game bosses, so that you have a little bit of damage window where those dudes do not die. So for example, on Cyrus, after that 4 seconds, it's likely that they're gonna die, so you need as much time to actually be doing some damage. During maps, it's absolutely not gonna matter at all, because you're just gonna be destroying everything, but when you get to those big boy boss fights, Blessed Rebirth is definitely required. Now, I do have a renewal here as well, because I do think that's the best jewel, a Blessed Rebirth renewal, but as you can see, that puts us over level 100, so we're not going to have that. It doesn't matter, it's just the Blessed Rebirth that you need here. And then we're going up to the last small cluster here, which again is that uncompromising, and that is going to make it to where our determination doesn't take up any mana. That's absolutely required, or you will not have enough mana to run your build, so make sure you have those. 1 medium and 2 smalls with uncompromising. Very, very important. Other than that, that's really the build here for the tree itself. As you guys can see, here's kind of our stats here. We've got about 1.9 million DPS, which we have 9 of those normally. And when we go over our skills, which I guess we'll click here in a second, that's actually, we have 11 of them because of, and upwards of maybe even 15, because so essentially the way the sentinels works is you have 9 regular sentinels, you have 3 magic sentinels, and 1 rare sentinel, so quite a bit. But let's go ahead and click on determination over here in our skills. If we get a phantasmal dominating blow, this is actually insane. Phantasmal dominating blow, maximum 2 summon normal sentinels, so that's almost basically, that's actually a little bit more than a 20% more buff, so it's a very, very strong alternate quality gem. Basically what that means is instead of 9, we're getting 11, so very, very strong. Now, I would probably still do that even if you have only a level 20. I would do a level 20 Phantasmal over a level 21 default. So that's what I would do. So go to the Phantasmal, and you guys might be tricked here. It might be a little bit less damage, but remember, that's not calculating the fact that you have 2 more. So we're actually having significantly more damage by just having that Phantasmal. So I'm not going to go over every single skill here. You guys can check it out, but very basically, we do have our dominating blow set up right here. Our auras that we're going to be running are Pride and Determination, along with Fall Discipline. We have a Clarity, which you really don't even need. If you want, you can even run it at level 1. The reason I have it is because we have a Watcher's Eye, which we'll go over later, which you don't need. And if you don't have that, you don't need Clarity. Flame Dash, Vitality, and Precision. And again, that Precision is very important because we want as much accuracy rating as possible, and that accuracy rating not only applies to your minions but also to yourself. So watch this, we have hit chance 92%. If we take off precision, we go down to 65% hit chance. That's basically unplayable, so you absolutely need as much of this precision gem as possible. So moving on, we have Dread Banner, Awaken Generosity. Those are incredibly important for Impale. We also have Assassin's Mark, which is something new that I've been adding in all of my minion builds, and it's absolutely fantastic. And the reason I'm doing that, and we'll go over it in the Animate Guardian section when we talk about all of our gear, is we're going to be able to run Assassin's Mark as well as Vulnerability. So it's really, really strong. Moving on, we have Desecrate Flame Off, Flesh Offering, and Convocation. We do have on Flesh Offering here Divergent, so make sure you guys, when y'all are looking at this and we're going through everything here, some of these do have alternate qualities. Make sure you guys pay attention to that. Like Pride has Divergent. That's just because it's more damage. Moving on here to the next one, which is our Raised Spectre. We do have an Anomalous Raised Spectre. Now, we have that because it actually gives them more life. And again, I was getting super tired of my minions dying, and especially my Raised Spectres, because they add so much damage to the build. We definitely want to make sure that they stay alive. So I'm trying to give them as much survivability as possible, especially when you have with Feeding Frenzy, which makes them aggressive and they are attacking and they're getting in the fray and trying to die, basically. So it's very important to get as much life and defenses on our dudes as possible. So we also have Animate Guardian. Divergent actually gives them more life, so 40% increased minion life, very, very strong. And then we have minion life, just going with the trend there to get them as much life as possible. Now, moving on, we have this here, which you'll see is called the Greater Harbinger of Time. Basically what that is, which it'll transition us actually into our items here, is this belt. It's called the Torrent's Reclamation. This is actually probably the most expensive item in the build. It's going to cost you upwards of 5 to 7 exalts, and that's what the purchase price when I bought this. I'm not sure what the purchase price will be after this video or any of my subsequent videos, but this is an insane belt. It's going to give you so much increased attack speed and movement speed, as well as your minions' attack speed and movement speed. So it's an all-around incredible belt. If you don't have this, it's totally fine. You can actually just go with a Darkness Enthroned, which is a 1 chaos item, and then you can go with a let's even just craft an item and I'll show you guys. So we're going to go to Jewel, and we're going to type in Abyssal Jewel, and it's the Ghastly Eye Jewels. Those are the minion ones. Sorry about that. Somebody wants to purchase an item. So we're going to go back to prefixes, and we're going to, let's actually just turn that off. And we're going to have, let's see, we're going to probably want one with Energy Shield. And next we're going to want one with Minions Deal Increased Damage. Actually, that would be perfect right there. If you can get this gem, which I'm about to show you, it would be actually insane. Minions deal increased damage. So right here, this jewel would be a fantastic jewel. New item, Ghastly Jewel. So any type of energy shield, you can even get dexterity or strength on these. Minions deal increased damage if used a minion skill recently, and minions deal increased physical damage. That would be the perfect jewel right there. And if you had 2 of them, it's just a whole lot of damage. It's not as much damage as that Torrent's Reclamation. As you can tell, it's about 100,000 off, so about a total of 1,000,000 DPS lower, but it's not a big deal, and you actually could do it for, you know, maybe 40 chaos total compared to 6 to 7 exalts. So that's one good change that you guys can have there. So let's go back to the very top here and we'll talk about the items that we're going to have. So this item is a very good item. It's actually a crafted item that I used a couple different things on here. So as you can tell, the base of the item is a temple mod. Minions deal 66% increased damage, and minions have 5% chance to deal double damage. So basically a 5% more multiplier and some minion damage. This only drops from the Temple of Atzwaddle. So you're going to have to either run that yourself or you're going to have to just purchase it. Good thing is those are actually very cheap. This item was picked up for only about 15 chaos, and I just got lucky and I annulled a couple of the mods off to where I only had maximum mana and that minion damage deal double damage, as well as the minions increase damage. And from there I was able to multi-mod it with the can have up to 3 crafted modifiers. And on top of that, I also have trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill, and some more minion increased attack speed. Now let's go back to our skills here and I'll show you the reason that we're doing this. This is our weapon right here. So when you have something that triggers a socketed spell when you use a skill, so using a skill is anything. That could be Flame Dash, it could be your Dominating Blow, so everything under the sun. It's going to be casting a Desecrate and Flesh Offering and Convocation automatically. So it basically just automates this whole process of having to cast Flesh Offering as well as Convocation. It just makes for a much smoother playstyle. I know a lot of people do like the Scourge Claw, and that is totally fine as well. You could have the Scourge Claw up here. It's very slightly less damage, but that's really not a big deal. You actually have a little bit more attack speed on this, which is nice, and you're going to have to manually cast your Desecrate, Flesh Offering, and Convocation, but that's really not that big of a deal. It just comes down to personal preference on that. I prefer the one where it automatically does it for me. So moving on to our shield, this is incredibly important actually. We do have a Aegis Aurora. This is kind of what the whole defense is based on with this build. So as you can see, that replenishes energy shield equal to 2% of your armor when you block. So look at this. We have how much armor? We have 51,000 armor in this build. That is so much armor. So not only is that giving us 90% physical damage reduction, but that's also working with this Aegis Aurora to give us 2% of all of that armor back as energy shield when we block, and that equals about 1,000 energy shield. So 1,000 energy shield every time we block, and we have a really high chance to block regular attacks and spell attacks. So a very, very strong item here. And as you can tell, the best corruption that you can get on this is actually the physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage. Since we are CI, we don't take any chaos damage at all. So that basically just means that 8% of physical damage we take is completely mitigated. 100% mitigation. You'll also notice here on the very bottom there, it says Animate Guardian. Most items, just so you guys know, I manually inputted that. If you guys don't see that on y'all's, that's just because that's the way the item is. So we can go ahead and type this in. Aegis. We'll put in a normal. Oop. I misspell Aegis all the time. Aegis Aurora. We'll put that in as a normal shield. So you're going to lose a lot of damage, and that's totally fine. The reason it is so much more damage increase is because that is our Animate Guardian. Where did it go? That's our Animate Guardian. So what does our Animate Guardian actually do? We can go ahead and talk about that now. Let's go back up here to our Animate Guardian. So minions have 50% increased critical strike, multiplier, some move speed for us, and minions deal 10% more damage. Now that 10% more damage actually comes from Colding Strike, from the Kingmaker, which is the most important item for our Animate Guardian. I did just release an Animate Guardian video that is the in-game kind of guide for the Animate Guardian, so I'll link that in the description as well. There's only one thing that I would change actually that we're going to talk about in my next build. My Necromancer Carrion Golem build. I'm actually going to change up my Animate Guardian very, very slightly, but for now, it's almost the exact same items. If you guys want to check out that Animate Guardian video, that is how you get all of this extra damage. And if you don't have an Animate Guardian that has all of that, no worries. Just go ahead and go to this weapon slot over here and click the normal Aegis Aurora shield, and you'll get your more accurate DPS. So moving down here, the helmet is very important for this build. It is giving you a ton of mana. It has a decent amount of energy shield, and it increases the amount of mana you have reserved and gain armor equal to your reserved mana, which is very, very important. So that leads me into going back to our skill tree here and talking about our Ascendancy class. So for our Ascendancy class, we're very much focused on two things. One, buffing up our minions with Radiant Crusade and Unwavering Crusade. It's going to give them tons and tons of attack speed as well as Intimidate on hit. And these are the two nodes that you actually want to get first in your build as you're leveling up. You want to go with Radiant Crusade first, and you want to go with Unwavering Crusade second. Now from there, we do get the Bastion of Hope for a lot of block chance. And lastly, once you have switched over to the CI version, this Radiant Faith is extremely important. Grants armor equal to 160% of reserved life to you and nearby allies, which actually does nothing, but the big thing is grants maximum energy shield equal to 10% of your reserved mana. So as you can tell here, there's kind of a trend, right? We're reserving as much mana as possible. We actually have 5,000 mana in this build, so reserving all of that basically down to what I think we have maybe like 300 or so, anywhere between 100 and 300 left. That is a ton of mana reserved. So with this node, that's going to give us a ton of energy shield. And with the item, the Memory Vault, that's going to give us a ton of armor. So very, very solid. That's one of the reasons that we have so much armor in this build, is this Memory Vault helmet. When I purchased this item was about 60 chaos. I am assuming that this is going to probably go up in price. So definitely try and snag one of these guys as early as possible. Now, going on to the, actually, let's not forget this, that the enchant up there, Dominating Blow can summon an additional rare Sentinel of Dominance. That's extremely strong. Most people are not going to be able to actually get that because it's extremely rare, and we do need this exact helmet in our build. We cannot go with any other helmet, so to get an enchant with any of the Dominating Blow on there is going to be very expensive, but this is the best one for you guys to look out for. Dominating Blow can summon an additional rare Sentinel of Dominance. Basically what that means is, as you heard me talk about earlier, we have 9 regular white sentinels that come from just killing normal monsters. We have 3 magic sentinels that come from killing magic monsters, and we have 1 rare that comes from a rare monster. And the cool thing about those is once you kill a rare monster, that sentinel actually has all of its stats and its auras, so it's kind of like a mini headhunter. Very, very cool. So getting a second dominating blow can summon an additional rare sentinel of dominance. That's a second little mini headhunter buff, so it's very, very strong. There's another enchant that it gives the dominating blows, I think it's 2 additional magic sentinels, and that's another very good one. Both of those are very good for mapping, but don't really do anything for you in the in-game, like the bosses. But for mapping, it's absolutely fantastic. It's so much damage. So yeah, didn't want to forget that. Let's go to the body armor here. The skin of the loyal or the skin of the lords, either one is just fine. The big thing here is we're going with 100% increased global defenses, and that is for our armor. Again, we have so much armor, and this is buffing our armor even more. Now, this armor is definitely best in slot. You can't get any better than this. It has +2 to level of socketed duration gems. Dominating blow is a duration gem, and you take 50% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. You guys are probably not going to have that, and that is totally fine. The normal base item of Skin of the Loyal or Skin of the Lords is totally fine. It's just that +1 to socketed gems and 100% increased global defenses. If you're able to get a good corruption on it as well, more power to you. And also, just a note, if you get a Skin of the Lords, the Skin of the Lords come with a notable passive on the skill tree. Like, for example, you might get something like, where is it? Minion instability on there. You don't want that. You want to make sure that the node on the Skin of the Lords does not interfere with your build. If we were to get one with minion instability, it would kill all of our sentinels when they hit 33% life, or our animate guardian, or our zombies, and we absolutely don't want that. If you get something random, like I think I saw one that was this Doomsday, and it was super cheap. It was only like, 30 chaos or something for a Skin of the Lords with a Doomsday on it. That doesn't affect our build in any way, so that's totally fine. It's basically just a cheaper version of the Skin of the Loyal. So definitely be on the lookout for Skin of the Lords with a notable that doesn't affect us, or that does affect us. Either one's totally fine. Now, for our gloves, these are also pretty important. I suggest you guys self-craft these. You want a Hunter base, and it needs to be at least eye level 80. So I did this myself. I went ahead and crafted. And the big thing you're looking for here with alterations, by the way, is that strike skills target 1 additional nearby enemy. We do have Dominating Blow, which is a strike skill. So basically, it's like a mini version of Ancestral Call for free. So very, very good, and it helps you with spawning your sentinels, because the more monsters you can attack at once, the higher the chance is that you can spawn a sentinel. From there, I was able to do the multi-modding, and I added a whole bunch of energy shield, and I just got lucky with the resistance on there as well. So this is a good example of what kind of an in-game pair of gloves would be. That strike skills is the most important stat there. Moving on to our gloves. Now, I'm sorry, our boots. Now, we have a super cheap Rainbow Stride. You can get these for like 1 chaos. What I would suggest is you guys actually search on the trade website and filter it by enchants, and go ahead and pick up a good enchant, like the regenerates 2% life or the movement speed. Those are pretty good. Or you can even get the attack speed one as well, up to 16% increased attack speed. So try and get a Rainbow Stride with some good enchants from the lab. Moving on to our amulet, we have a Stone of Lazwar. The really big thing here is the chance to block spell damage, because again, we're trying to get as much spell block and regular block as possible. It also has a little bit of mana, which is fantastic, and we're allocating Indomitable Army, which again is just trying to get as much defenses for our minions as possible, and Indomitable Army is one of the best out there for defenses for your minions. It's just a little out of the way, and we normally wouldn't pick it up, but we're going to go ahead and anoint it. One of the other big anoints is if you don't feel like your summons are taking that much damage and they're not dying, if you want more defenses for yourself, you could go with Deflection instead for a lot more block chance, which is also very, very good. But I went with that because I was kind of getting tired of my Spectres dying, and that has significantly helped it. So moving back to our items here, you'll also notice here that I have a very good corruption, which is pride has increased aura effect. So that is very, very good as well. It's just a lot more damage. Again, you guys don't have to have that. It's very cheap to make this corruption, actually. So buy a Stone of Lazwar, anoint it with whatever you want to anoint it, and go ahead and corrupt it, and that doesn't cost you much at all. That'll probably cost you maybe 6 chaos, 7 chaos, and you're gonna have to do it a whole bunch, but eventually you will get the pride increased aura effect, and it is very, very solid. For your rings, we actually just have kind of some basic rings here. The big thing about our rings is we want as much dex and strength as possible, so we don't have to get dex and strength on our tree so we can save some points. So you'll notice here I just get a whole bunch of dex, whole bunch of strength, and a little bit of energy shield and a little bit of resistances. As you notice, we don't have many rare items in our build. We have a lot of unique items, so getting as much resistances as possible on these 2 items is very important. You'll also note here that if you want, you can use the essences and get minions deal increased damage, and that is nice, but it is pretty hard to get a good roll like this with all that dex, with some energy shield, with some mana, and because also keep in mind that getting mana is very important as well. The more mana you have, the more you can reserve, and the more armor you have, and the more energy shield you have. So I would say the most important things here is dex, strength, and then mana, and then resistances. But of course, make sure you're capped on your elemental resistances. We definitely want to be capped. So those are your 2 rings. If you want to get one with an unset ring, you can, but it's going to be very difficult. I would honestly suggest getting a moonstone ring or a cerulean ring. English is hard. And the cerulean ring gives you 10% increased mana, up to 10% increased mana. And that's with the life and mana modifier on it from the, what are they called? I always forget this word. Not the intrinsic, the prismatic, the catalyst. There we go. Good lordy, the catalyst. You can get the life and the mana, and that increases that maximum mana, and it also increases the mana on it as well. So pretty nice if you want to do that. Same thing here for this moonstone. You could also do the prismatic catalyst if you really need to and get some extra resistances, or you could do the attribute catalyst and get as much dexterity and strength as possible, and maybe save you some dexterity and strength on your other ring. Very, very good options. Lots of things that you can do with your rings here to kind of round out everything that you need in your build. So moving on to the belt, we already talked about this, the Torrent's Reclamation. It's a little bit expensive, but it's absolutely fantastic for both damage and for utility, because you're going to be moving around the map a lot faster since you have some recovery rate for your flame dash. So very, very good. And make sure you guys summon your Greater Harbinger of Time every time you relog into the game, anytime something funky happens, and just make sure you check up on your bar that it is there, because it's so much damage that you don't want to be running, 6-7 maps or a boss, and then you realize, oh crap, I forgot to summon my dude. Make sure you guys are doing that. I do that all the time. So moving on to our flask, the actual most important flask here is this Withering Jar. Now, the reason this is very important is because it spawns 2 little wormies that pop out of the jar, and you can actually attack those and spawn sentinels off of those. So a really good option for getting some sentinels before you start the map or before you start a boss. And the good thing about this build here is that we're going to be able to spawn these a lot easier since we don't have zombies in this build. Typically when you have zombies or like a golem, those guys are going to attack it really fast, and they're going to kill those little wormies before you're able to get those converted into sentinels. But with our build, it is going to be much easier to go ahead and kill them yourself and spawn a couple sentinels. You can actually get 4 sentinels out before the start of a map or before the start of a boss while using this jar. So very, very strong. And from there, just make sure that we're getting immune to curses, we're immune to bleed, and we're immune to freeze and chill, and I typically also get immune to ignite. Ignite kind of hurts this build a little bit because as you guys can tell, we're very good on cold resistances, but our fire and lightning, even though we're capped, it would still be nice to have a little bit more defenses on there, and making sure that we get a little bit of defenses based off of the immune to ignite is pretty nice. So moving on, we already talked about most of these here. Let's go down to, I think the only thing we didn't talk about was this Watcher's Eye, which again is completely not necessary. This is an absolute in-game item that is many exalts. And the big thing here that you're getting is the gain % of maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield while affected by clarity. And that's why I have that level 1 clarity in the build. So if you don't have this Watcher's Eye jewel, don't put clarity in your build, or you can, honestly, it doesn't really matter, but you don't need it. And once you do have it, it is so much extra energy shield. I think it's around 1,000 energy shield. Let's check. So we have 6,800 energy shield. Now let's take this off. We have about 6,000, so it gave me about 850 energy shield. So very, very good. I think this is what most people are going to be sitting at with their build, around 6,000 energy shield. And then once you finally are able to spend a little bit of currency and get this Watcher's Eye, you'll be about 1,000 energy shield higher. So overall, the items were not too expensive, to be honest. The most expensive item was definitely the Torrent's Reclamation. The Skin of the Lords, or the Skin of the Loyal can get a bit pricey. I'm not sure how the price is going to go up when this video comes out. I'm hoping that it stays relatively cheap. Remember that you can get the Skin of the Lords. Those are usually cheaper. And just get one with a notable that has nothing to do with us, and it's going to be pretty cheap. The Memory Vault could go up in price. I know in hardcore, I've heard a ton of people say that these are extremely expensive in hardcore. So I hope the price comes down for you guys in hardcore, but it is worth it. This build setup is so tanky, guys. I literally never die in maps. The only time I've ever died on this character is doing bosses like Cyrus, where it's just wonky to get your sentinels out, and it doesn't feel that good. But I was doing 6-man carries on pure Cheula runs, and I was able to solo kill the pure Cheula boss by myself multiple times, so it felt totally fine. So the damage is absolutely there, even with this 1.3 million per, and that's without our Animate Guardian. Let's do the math on that. Let's just kind of get a final take on the DPS numbers here. So we have 9 of them normally, so that's about 12 million DPS. And if you have that enchant on your helmet, you're going to have 11, so that's about 14 to 15 million DPS. And then once you have your Animate Guardian set up, let's go figure out what that one is. So that jumps up significantly, so let's figure out that. So 1.7 times the 9, you're jumping up to 15.5 million. And if you have the Helm Enchant, that's going to be 1.7 times 11, which is going to be almost 20 million Shaper DPS. So the damage is absolutely there. The defenses is absolutely there. Overall, I think this was a fantastic build. I really had a good time playing it. I was able to do some in-game maps. I was able to do some in-game bosses. Everything was a breeze, except, like I mentioned, those random few bosses, which isn't too big of a deal for me. I personally always suggest this to guys. I suggest you guys have a mapping character and a boss killing character, and just kind of switch between them as you need. If you're doing a whole bunch of maps and you're able to just kind of blast through them on your mapping character, and then you get to a boss, swap over to your boss killing character and kill it real quick and go right back to mapping. And I definitely think this character is a jack of all trades. It's going to be doing your mapping very, very well, and it's going to be doing most bosses in the game very, very well as well. It's just those random bosses like Cyrus that it just feels a little clunky. And speaking of clunky, I did want to mention one last thing to you guys. We're almost at the very end of this video, and we're just now getting to it. But these skills, just make sure that you guys have melee. Where is it in here? So this is by the way, this is the end game build when you have all of this damage. What I would suggest, and I'm actually going to put in here for you guys, is Melee Splash. I just want to at least have you guys see that this is in here. And let's put an Awakened Melee Splash, because it is absolutely huge for this build, especially when you're mapping. Oops, I did not do the right one. Awakened Melee Splash. Very good. So, and what I would do is, if you want to switch these out, you're going to switch off Melee Fizz. So you're going to lose a little bit of damage, but it makes it so much smoother. And the reason you use Melee Splash is because when you attack, it's going to be splashing all of the monsters around you, and all of those monsters that you hit have that chance to spawn the Sentinel. So you're going to be spawning a ton of Sentinels using Melee Splash, whereas if you don't have that, and you just have Melee Fizz, you're only attacking one monster, so you're going to be spawning Sentinels much slower, which on bosses is not a big deal. So you would have this set up for boss killing with this Melee Fizz, and in your inventory you would just have your Awakened Melee Splash ready, and you would swap that out for when you're doing mapping. That's currently what I do, and it works absolutely perfectly. I would say when you guys are leveling up this build up to this point where you're at mega DPS, I would really always use melee splash just so it feels a lot smoother. Melee splash is very, very good. I did not mention that in my first video. I apologize for the League starter version, and I definitely wanted to mention that in here. Let's definitely use melee splash and then switch that off for melee fizz for bosses. But yeah, guys, that's really all I have on this one. Overall, I had a great time playing this character. I hope you guys do too. My next build is going to be a low life necromancer carrion golem build, and it is going to be my boss killer. So it's looking pretty good on that one. I'm pretty excited to start that build. We're actually going to start it here today. So check out the stream. We're going to be leveling it up. We're going to be doing some in-game content on it. And typically what I do is I sell some of my gear for my characters. So this dominating blow guy, I will be selling it off to a lucky viewer. I usually give a pretty significant discount. So I'm always happy to do that for you guys. If y'all are interested, let me know in the comments. And I typically sometimes will choose somebody at random in the comments. As kind of like a fun thing to do. So let me know in the comments if you guys are also playing this build and enjoying it. And I think that's really all I got for this one, guys. I appreciate you guys sticking through. This was a little bit longer of a video, about 40 minutes long. So I definitely appreciate you guys sticking through. Thanks, everyone, and I will catch y'all in the next one.